Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
What do you want to do with your life? I want to talk.
Welcome to I Want to Talk from Lima, Peru. Lima, Peru. Yep, I just landed here yesterday. And I've got a short South American tour going on. Hitting Peru. It was the first time in Lima. Brazil, a couple of shows. Argentina. Someplace else. It doesn't, I don't need to know. No, I really don't. I just, not really obsessed. Doesn't really change a lot where I'm playing. It's all about the performance and the show and the audience. And I find there's a great commonality between audiences all over the world, a very great similarity. Their love of what I do, hopefully. Well, the people who are there, usually. I haven't run into too many people who weren't there because they love what I do. People don't usually buy tickets. You have that happen when you're the opening band. You know, you'll get some negativity because there'll be people, you know, who are there to see the headliner, and they don't really want to put up with the opening band, even if they're known. They're not interested in the opening band. And I've been to... I'll tell a couple of stories about that since I'm already digressing. A couple of stories about that. One is, opening shows in England in the 80s, early 80s. The audience would throw things at the other bands, the bands that they didn't come to see. A lot of things. The famous human shite story, the shit story, someone threw at us at the Reading Festival. And if you haven't heard that story, I'm not going to tell it again because it's been told pretty much to death, but you can look it up. You can easily find Twisted Sister shit story. but I mean, that just tells you the level of hatred and animosity. So, you get that kind of thing going on. The other thing you get in the arenas with reserved seating, and it really sucks, is that the people that have come for the headliner don't give a shit about the opening band. If they don't give a shit about the opening band, which can often be the case, they'll show up fashionably late. Because why get there at 8 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock to see the opening band when they can just roll in at 8:30 and get their reserved front seats that they pay top dollar for. And that seems reasonable and fair enough. But for the artist on stage, it's a little demoralizing to be playing to an empty, like in an arena, and the whole floor is empty. And now when you're starting out, you kind of accept it and you're used to it. And often, so you could have the rest of the arena, because you got to realize that the hardcore fans of the headliner always snap up those tickets. So they don't show. The other people in the arena might be more accepting to an opening act, but they're like way back out of your reach. So it's like a really awkward thing. And Twisted Sister, when we reunited, we took an opening slot. We only headlined because we're Twisted fucking Sister. And if people didn't want us to headline, we didn't play. It was very simple. If they wanted us and they would pay us the right amount of money and the situation was right, we would go and headline and do it. But we were not like, oh, we've just got to play any chance we can, man. We just got to get up there on the stage and jam. No, that wasn't Twisted Sister. We were there to do a job. People wanted to see us. We did the job. If you didn't want to see us, we're not going to waste your time. We're not wasting our time. But the opportunity to open up for Alice Cooper, one of my heroes, one of the band's heroes, particularly the original Alice Cooper band, just want to denote that. I want to acknowledge that Alice Cooper was a band, and I love Alice, the person, and he's great, but it was originally a band, and it was very much a band. It was a band in that everybody was writing the songs. Not everybody, but Michael Bruce, Dennis Dunaway. People contributed. It was a band trust, a mind trust. The whole Alice Cooper concept was the bands. And, you know, even the ideas of Alice hanging himself and chopping his head off and all those things, this was the band's creations. They were a band. Dennis Dunaway and Alice, they were in art class together. These guys go back to high school together, you know? So they were a band in the truest sense. They thought it would be clever, it'd be a great publicity thing if Vince, their lead singer, changed his name to Alice Cooper. That'd be a great publicity gag. To quote Michael Bruce, the guitar player, who I became friends with, that was the biggest mistake we ever made. Because when Alice left the band, he was now just using his legal name, Alice Cooper. And the Alice Cooper band became all but forgotten. And it always makes me crazy. I mean, Alice certainly has done some great work as a solo artist and certainly deserves to be able to go out there on his own. But Alice Cooper using his name killed the careers of the other guys. And they were a great band. Alice has gone on to play with some amazing technical musicians, but there was something about the rawness about the original band. Michael Bruce, Dennis Dunaway, Neil Smith, and Glenn Buxton, the late Glenn Buxton. There was something magic there that only comes from struggling and working together and suffering through things together and experiencing the ups and downs of a career, you know. And that it's just sad that never came back together. Their time, they recently, you know, reunited for some songs with Alice, and it was cool, but it's way too late. The cycle for the retro cycle is a 20-year cycle. For those of you interested, we're in the 2000s cycle. We're heading into the 2000s cycle. We were in the 1990s cycle there. Look at the music and the flannel shirts and all that shit, right? It's always 20 years. When Twisted was coming up, it was the 60s retro. When I was in high school in the 70s, it was the 50s retro. It's always been a 20-year cycle. So the opportunity for a band of the 70s, like the original Alice Cooper band, really was in the 90s. And I say 90s, yeah. And they missed that opportunity. That's, if you look back, that's when those 70s bands were reuniting, were doing their thing. And the original Alice Cooper band missed their opportunity. But opening up for Alice, Twisted Sister was not used to being the opener, and it was arenas. And when we went out there, well, what do you know? The whole floor, the orchestra, would be empty for the most part. Because the hardcore Alice Cooper fan, who, mind you, is older. They weren't 80s rock fans, they were 70s rock fans. Alice Cooper's heyday was in the early 70s. Okay, that's when the original Alice Cooper band, all those songs, School's Out, mid-70s, School's Out, Billion Dollar Babies, Elected, 18, all that, Is It My Body, Ballad of Dwight Fry, all these great songs, they're all from the early and mid-70s. So the people who were fans of that stuff are actually older fans who Twisted Sister was not their era. So they aren't even showing up. And it is bugging the fuck out of me. So my wife always says, when I get mad, I'm at my best. And I'm really mad. So I tell the audience, I say, listen, these fuckers who aren't here yet, they're going to roll in later on, fashionably late. And when they come in, I'm going to say, hey, how you doing? But what I'm thinking is, they're sucking on my dick. So when I'm saying, hey, how you doing? I'm imagining they're sucking on my dick. So just remember that. Well, sure enough, the set rolls on. We get to the end of the set, and the hardcore Alice Cooper fans start rolling in, and I start going, "Hey, how you doing?" And the entire arena is dying with laughter. And these people are looking around because they could hear the tumultuous laughter from the audience, from the arena, and you know it's something to do with my greeting, but they have no idea what was said before they got there. Fuck you guys. Anyway, I don't know how I got to this. So I'm in Belize doing solo shows for the love of metal, Twisted Sister stuff, and a lot of the new stuff, which I'm really happy that I'm getting a chance to play. Never been, did I say Belize? Peru. Never played in Peru before. Been here, went to Machu Picchu with Suzette, but never played here with Twisted Sister, so it's the first in Lima. Should be interesting, exciting on a certain level. Smaller venue, but at the same time, it's great to finally connect with this audience. I often feel very bad though after I connect because they're so enthusiastic, and even though I try to give an energized show, I know that in my 60s, I'm not what I was in my 20s. No matter how fit I am, no matter how energized I am, there's just no way. There's just a certain stupidity, young, dumb, and full of cum, that you got in your 20s that just can't be replicated in your 60s, no matter how good you are. So I feel bad that often feel bad that Twisted Sister never made it to some of these countries in our heyday. But be that as may, I'm here. So, there's a couple of things I want to talk to you about. I had a subject to talk about for today's show, but it's going to get sidetracked. I don't think I'm going to get to it. And I'll explain why in a second. But I've been using social media as sort of a guideline for what I should be talking about, and seeing what kind of stuff you react to that I'm talking about or that's being talked about, and then use that as a guide to what I'm going to talk about each week. But what's happening is I realized that almost without fail, all you want to hear me talk about, all you're interested in is things related to music when it comes to me. And that's a little disheartening. I know some of you out there are going, no, D, that's not true. But for the most part, that is the case. And, I've done a lot of things in my life. And one of the things I've been doing for many years is radio. And I did morning radio. I did talk morning radio, 4 hours a day of talk. And it was very successful. The only reason I left was I had a disagreement with management, and they terminated my contract. This is well documented on the Howard Stern show that my ratings were great. Actually wound up being simulcast. I was in Connecticut, then got simulcast into Richmond, Virginia. And, the hope was to be nationally syndicated with the morning show, but things went south between me and management. I'll leave the names out of it. I get in too much trouble for naming names. But anyway, and on those shows, we would talk about everything. Pop culture, politics, interviews would range, would be from actors and movie stars and musicians to politicians, authors. I would cover a lot of different things, and I pride myself at being able to have a conversation and discuss a lot of subjects. Yet, much to my disappointment, if social media is any reflection, anything that you're really interested that I connect with, communicating with you guys, it has some connection to music. It's what you react to. I don't know how I'm going to change that. Yeah, you're probably screaming and going, just do it, D. I probably will. So I was actually reacting to Tracy Guns from LA Guns. Great guitar player, really just authentic, Tracy and I met a couple of times, and we've never really got to know each other, but let it be known that I just have the utmost respect. He is an original LA guy, and he, was there. He's been in so many bands out there, but he's just real deal. Can't explain it, but he's a rocker to his core. Great guitar player, just great vibe about him. Anyway, we've been kind of joking around on Twitter, and Tracy raised the question: what bands out there, new bands, are you hearing and are you liking? And this just blew up, as a conversation online, because as I've been saying to the naysayers about rock and roll, like Adam Levine and Gene Simmons, there are plenty of talented, great bands out there. They're just not getting the love and attention that bands used to get in the past. So it's been a great conversation. I wanted to talk about that, and I'll probably wind up talking about that next week unless something else gets in the way. But what I will be talking about in a minute is the passing of Bernie Torme, a guitar player I worked with in a project called Desperado, played with Ian Gillan, and I was going to say most notably, but I don't think it's noted enough, was the first guitar player to replace Randy Rhoads 2 weeks after he passed away. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I just want to start off just discussing the podcast in general and my issues with the podcast. And I'm having issues. The issues is keeping up with it. The issues are content. I want to do more with this platform, and I love the mic and the opportunity to talk. I want to talk, but I wanted to do more with it. But the reality is, and I've been down this road once before with a earlier podcast, it's very difficult for me, given my lifestyle, my style in general, and I'll be more specific in a second, to keep up with this and do it the way it needs to be done. Now, one of the things that I've learned, Jamie Jost has got a successful podcast, and so does Chris Jericho. Great podcasts. And they are very committed to getting those interviews and conversations and staying on top of it. They do very well with it. But Jamie and Jericho on 2 occasions has flown to where I was. I was nearby to get that interview. Cool guy, by the way. No, what's the word I'm looking for? Attitude. I mean, he just, like myself, he moves around by himself, no entourage, no fanfare. You don't need any of that shit. And he gets it done. And he's very committed. He does a great podcast as well, as does Jamie. Jamie seizes every opportunity he can for interviews. He'll talk to anybody and everybody, which I should be doing as well. The problem here is Jamie, and actually I'll say that this goes for Jericho as well, they will be at a festival or they'll be someplace where they're performing. And, of course, there's a lot of other artists there. They will, even though they're performing that night or that day, they will go and do multiple interviews with people and stockpile, which is a smart thing to do. Because of the intensity of the way I sing, the fact that my speaking voice is I'm not using the mechanism properly. I've developed a way of talking, which has made me a lot of money because people like the sound of my voice and do voiceover and radio. I sing, but it's everything I do is straining the vocal cords and the voice box. Just talking right now, the way I talk. And I've been to doctors, I've been to therapists, I've been to voice coaches, and they all like, you're pushing too hard. You gotta, use the voice differently. You can achieve the same results without with so much stress on the chords, yada, yada, yada. And they try to teach me, let the air flow. You know, they give me all these lessons, and I should listen to them, but it just compromises my ability to be me, to talk in a upper register, and without any gravel in the voice. Yeah, that's all great, but that's not me. Me's down here somewhere. It's just become who I am, and I feel very, I was going to say emasculated, but it's not emasculated. I just feel like I'm not myself when I'm using my voice delicately and talking and not pushing so hard and all those wonderful things. That's not Dee Snider. So as a result, I can't do the interviews on show days. I can't do them. So I'm missing tons of opportunities at these festivals and these conventions and things I go to where I could be interviewing people and speaking with people, and I'm just not getting to it. I'm not getting it done. As a result, I don't have any right now stockpiled interviews. Now, there are people who just talk like I'm doing, and this is what I'm doing, but even that is with my lifestyle and the way I run around and do things and the different things, radio and television and working on movies and producing and music and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying these other people aren't busy people. They are. Jamie Jasta, busy. So is Chris Jericho. But they figured it out. I have not figured it out yet. And I'm hoping I can figure out some kind of rhythm to getting these interviews so that I can mix them up with my conversations with you, and stockpiling and having things so my producer, Brian McKay, isn't like biting his nails. I don't know if it's McKay or Mackey, but biting his nails every week, wondering if Dee's going to get him something on time. It's like the poor bastard is literally being handed things like hours before it needs to be put up there. And I feel terrible. Actually, Brian, I'm trying to get it done sooner, but things keep getting in the way. Travel and delays and whatever. Internet. We had a situation where I was trying to upload a show the other day, and the internet for the country of Belize had slowed down. The country. And that's where I live. It was like, so I was kind of like, we got it up finally. It took hours and hours to load a stupid show. And it kept failing. So it's problematic. So, conversations, I'm going to continue to try and have them with you. I'm going to continue to have them with you on topics that I hope you find interesting. And, and then I've actually got time off end of April into May. And I'm back in the States, and my son's filming his movie in LA, so we're going to be spending some time out there. So I'm planning on, grabbing a bunch of interviews as I can so that I'll have some stuff. One person, I'm talking about the interviews I want to do, like Annie Jacobson, the woman who wrote Area 51. Her books are amazing, but if judging by my social media, you guys would give two shit about freedom of the Freedom of Information Act and books about the Pentagon's brain and Operation Paperclip about the harvesting of Nazi scientists after World War II, and Area 51 and things like that. I mean, again, if the conversations on social media have any indication, you don't care. I'm talking about Twitter, Instagram. Since it's more video related, it's odd what you react to. Like on Instagram, I'll put a conversation or whatever, statement, something, it'll get a few thousand. I put a video of me filming my stage pants leg. Stage pants. Talking about how Suzette had put all these bolts in the pants and they were scratching up my legs. Got like 10,000. Like, that was more interesting. What happened? Oh, it was my birthday, and we took a stupid video of me putting on a birthday hat and just making a bizarre face. 15,000. It's like, just going. I mean, that was it. I mean, it was, mind you, it was an insane face. The point is, those aren't topics of conversation. They're just Instagram people are interested in the visuals, and if it's odd enough, I don't even know what, pants leg, really? That got you, huh? Okay. Whatever floats your boat, man. Whatever floats your boat. So, before I get to Bernie, one other thing, an article just came out. I wish I could remember, but I reposted on social media. I can't remember the magazine it was in. But someone talking about Queen, early Queen, being the godfathers of heavy metal. And it was exactly what I've been saying, and that's a topic that got blown up on social media and in the press. I've been saying this, and he really not only backed what I said, but he did a really great analysis and documentation, from melodies to guitar tones to solos to lyrics, and really brought home, and with video and photos to back it up. It brought home what I've been saying. Case closed. I think one of the biggest things he put up there, which is even more case closed, was with the Queen Freddie Mercury tribute show that they did at Wembley Arena. Queen, being Brian May, John Deacon, and Roger Meadows Taylor, with Tony Iommi on guitar and James Hetfield on vocals, doing Stone Cold Crazy, a song from 1975, I believe it was. And I mean, it's the beginnings of thrash. I mean, forget it. And with Hetfield singing and Iommi playing rhythm guitar, I mean, it couldn't have been more metal. Could not have been more metal. All right. But I digress. This week on St. Paddy's Day, oddly, Irish guitar player Bernie Tormé passed away a day before his 67th birthday. Everybody's saying he was 66, but the next day he would have been 67. And Bernie was in a band called Desperado with me, and we were friends. And he used to say, Bernie stammered. He had a stutter. And but he used to say, thank fucking God I wasn't born on St. Paddy's Day, because he was sure it's like an Irish thing. If your child's born on St. Paddy's Day, they got to be named Paddy, and I guess the last thing he wanted to be was Paddy Tormé. So anyway, but he died, but he didn't die on that day. I had known he was very ill, critically ill. He was on life support for 4 days. And I don't have the full details because I didn't find out from his wife until he was on life support. But he got ill, like pneumonia, and turned into double pneumonia. And then it got really bad and he had to be hospitalized. And the next thing I know is they put him into an induced coma so they could intubate him so that to help him get well, because he was so sick. And he was on life support for 4 weeks. And finally, his wife and his 2 sons took him off. And, I don't, people use the term pull the plug. It's not pulling the plug. It's saying, it's saying he's not living on his own. If he's going to live, if they're going to, I say they, anybody my mom was on life support for a while. But you come to a point where you say, if they're going to live, let them live on their own. It's not actually living if there's machines breathing for you, if machines are keeping you alive. At least that's my opinion. And so after 4 weeks on life support, and Bernie was a very alive guy. He had actually just released his farewell album, farewell double album. He was very prolific. He did a lot of writing, a lot of recording, a lot of bands. And he had released that, and I think he'd done some shows in December, and then he got ill after that. And he had planned on touring more extensively in support of a farewell tour, but obviously it's not going to happen. So I woke up to a text from Mark Russell, the bass player for Desperado, also bass player for Widowmaker, the first bass player for Widowmaker, and dear friend who lives in Finland now, and it just said, "I am heartbroken." And I without even my coffee, I don't do nothing with my coffee. I picked up the phone and I called Mark. I said, "What happened?" He said, "Bernie died." And the two of us just broke down. I mean, we didn't see Bernie a lot in recent years, but when you spend an intense amount of time together, we spent 3 years working on the Desperado project, Bernie and I. He lived at my house. We became best of friends. Before Bernie Torme, I wrote every song myself. After meeting Bernie Torme, he taught me how to write with others. And we wrote over 100 songs together, that most of which will never be heard, for the Desperado project. And part of the reason why so many, because the Desperado project was coming together. It started as one idea, and then as Bernie and I started to work together and grow together, we realized where we wanted this relationship to go and where we wanted the sound to go. I originally thought that Bernie, that it wasn't going to be called Desperado. I think it was going to be called Me and the Boys, actually. And I had visions of a keyboard player, 2 guitar players, a saxophone player. I had a whole thing in there. And as Bernie came in, and I found Bernie from his work with a band called Mammoth. He wasn't in Mammoth, but he did a lot of guitar work on the Mammoth record. And I heard that guitar player said, "I don't know who this guy is." I was fearful that he was going to be Mammoth because the whole band were very big guys. And he wasn't. Bernie was a rail. So we tracked him down, reached out to him. We connected. He flew over to the States, stayed with me. Well, actually, not initially. He stayed at a hotel. And we bonded musically and started to evolve, and we started writing. And the project just kept evolving and evolving until it eventually became Desperado. And Desperado, ill-fated project that was shelved by Elektra Records, and I'll get into that in a second as well, wound up being me, Bernie, Clive Burr from Iron Maiden, and we were hoping on, I was really hoping on having a superstar bass player, someone from, like a Rudy Sarzo or, Nikki Sixx, or somebody that was from a band that was famous already. But after talking to a few different bass players and not finding the right fit, Bernie knew a kid, and he was a kid. I didn't know he was a kid, named Mark Russell, who turned out to be perfect. So Mark wasn't famous, but he joined the three of us, and we formed this band. And we worked together now, it must have been a couple more years, refining the Desperado sound and the image. We had this whole spaghetti Western thing going on. It was pretty cool, actually. And just pulling it together, and there was literally a bidding war for Desperado. There were multiple labels that wanted this project. And with this project, we are recording, I'm trying to think now, 88, so it's like 88 and 89. So we are shopping a deal. We signed a major deal with Elektra Records, and now we're recording, and it's a long process. really all said and done, 3 years of Bernie's in my life working together on this thing. And like I said, 100 songs. The label spent like $500,000. I personally spent another $500,000. It was an international band. I had an Irish guitar player, an English bass player, English drummer, Irish from the States. Everything we did, the expenses were multiplied because it all involved plane fares, hotels, car rentals, things. You know, when you're just, Twisted Sister was from New York. We lived near each other. We hung together. So there was just one. When we did things, it was as a unit. It wasn't flying people from all over the world. I've talked about the Desperado Project. So the Desperado Project got as far as album art done, record mastered, catalog number given to the release for the release of the album. I'm video director picked for the first single, There's No Angels Here. I'm packing to leave for England to shoot the video. Phone call comes in, and my manager tells me that Elektra Records has shelved the album. What does that mean? It means that they're just putting it on a shelf. They're not releasing it. Why? Well, the A&R guy who signed the band, and I'm not going to mention his name because he's pretty well known. He's moved on into other fields. He's a very big movie and TV writer and a friend, and it was not his fault. But he got an opportunity to work for a competing record label. He was made a better offer, and he went. And the president of Elektra Records, a dick who's dead, good, named Bob Krasnow. He, in retribution, shelved all the projects that this guy was working on. Killed them. Like it was the new Coke. I mean, the idea that you would... it's one thing to say, you know what, we've changed our mind about this new product. It's a widget, and we're going to decided not to release it to the public. It's another thing when it is for human beings and the ancillary people, their families, their crew, their management, all the people involved with them who are dependent upon the release of records and tours and sales. To shelve that was just corporate America at its worst. The corporate world at its worst. And I had never met Bob Krasnow, and that was a problem, really. And there's stories about this guy. May rot in hell. Yeah, I could care less. About this guy. A story about this guy wanting to kill the Motley Crue Shout at the Devil record. That at the last minute, he wanted to shelve the Motley Crue Shout at the Devil record. And Doc McGee, Crue's manager, and I think it may have been Doug Taylor. They may have been a team back then. Goes in and meets with him, and they refuse to let the record be shelved. They refuse. They force the company to put the record out. And Bob Krasnow famously says, well, famously, in my world, famously, all right, you're going to have your record release, but this band is going to go nowhere. They will get no support from Elektra Records. This story was told to a personal friend of mine by Doc McGee as they watched Bob Krasnow standing on his seat when Motley opened for Ozzy Osbourne at Madison Square Garden, standing with a Motley Crue headband, screaming, shout, shout, shout. Yeah, so much for commitment, asshole. Corporations are anything if not flexible. But my manager was not quite the level of McGee Thaler. Is it McGee? Doc McGee, Doug Thaler? McGee Thaler. They were not, really didn't have anybody, was not much of a manager. And there's a little glitch, and neither was my lawyer, who, Twisted Sister's lawyer, being my lawyer, was a guitar player that used to be in the band with the original bass player. That's like how Twisted Sister picked their lawyer. When I joined the band, they had a lawyer. I was like, whoa, you got a lawyer? You know? In his office hung one platinum album. That was Twisted Sister. You go to the top lawyers in the music business, and you have to wear sunglasses in their offices because there's so much gold and platinum everywhere. That should have been a clue. But I didn't know. I was a stupid kid. The band had a lawyer. Cool. Well, in negotiating the contract, there was one little phrase that allowed them to kill my album. The phrase was, record must be commercially acceptable as opposed to technically acceptable or mechanically. The latter, mechanically or technically acceptable, means that you put the, well, it was a LP then, or the CD, on the machine, you press play, and it actually plays. That means it's technically, mechanically acceptable. Commercially acceptable allows for the opinion of anybody who has one to decide if they think it's commercially acceptable. And wanting to shelve the Desperado record, they said, yeah, we don't think this is commercially acceptable. Record dead. So another failing of my management was that they had no relationship with the company. So it was where Doug Thaler and Doc McGee got to go in and meet with Bob Krasnow. My manager had never even met the president of the label. I had never met the president of the label. But I picked up the phone and I called him. And I said, Bob, it's D. Snyder. Hey, D, what's going on, man? I said, what are you doing? What are you doing? You know, you shelved my record. He goes, listen, D, I'm sure your record's very good. Red flag. What does that statement mean? It means he hasn't listened to it. I'm sure it's very good. He hasn't listened to it. But metal's not my thing. As a matter of fact, he says to me, if I could, I'd get rid of the metal bands we had. This is 1989. My son Cody was just born. The labels, the bands that they had were Metallica, Black Album, Motley Crue, Dr. Feelgood, The Cult, Firewoman record. I'm not sure if that's the name of the record, but the one with Firewoman. Massive records, the biggest records of all three of those bands' careers. And he had the audacity to say, if it was up to me, we'd get rid of the metal bands we had. Like Toad the Wet Sprocket was paying his mortgage. This is why I say burn in hell, Bob Krasnow. Died of cancer. I hope it was slow. This guy was a piece of shit. And the last thing he said to me was, D, listen, it's just business. It's nothing personal. There's a song on the second Widowmaker album called that. It's just business. It's nothing personal. Destroying my life. I had put everything into this project. I went bankrupt afterwards, sold our house, moved the family. I went into a downward spiral economically as a result of this record was supposed to come out. I was supposed to tour. This was supposed to be, you know, I was using my resources to last for years. Twisted broke up in 87. We were supposed to like hit the record was supposed to come out in 90. This is 1990. Bernie Torme's life, upside down. Clive Burr's, Mark Russell's. I wanted to get the record back so I could release it on another label. And Elektra wanted the full $500,000 they'd spent. $500,000. That was an insane amount of money to spend on a record. And labels didn't want to spend that money. And then they were wondering, why did Elektra drop the band? There must be something wrong. And no matter how much I defend myself, no matter how much I explain, it just seemed like I'm making excuses. So we couldn't get the rights to the album, the rights to the name, the rights to the songs. I was dead in the water. A good friend of mine, producer Rick Wake, dragged me out of the house and we started working on Widowmaker, but that project never went anywhere. It was already too damaged economically from the disaster that was Desperado. Decades later, I think 18 years later, small companies that release catalog items got the rights to release the record and it came out, but it was the time was over. The record was supposed to come out in 1990, this blues-based metal record, and I think it would have been relevant for the time of Guns N' Roses, for that matter, but it was way too late. So people don't even know about this record. So that was my time with Bernie Torme and our relationship. When we went our separate ways, we both had to try and recover from the catastrophe, the disaster. He went back to England. He lived in England. He was Irish. And I moved and tried to regroup with Widowmaker. Actually, Bernie was supposed to be in Widowmaker. He was going to be in Widowmaker. It was me, Bernie, I just remember this, and Mark Russell. Clive Burr was going to do the original Desperado band under a different name. And Clive Burr, went his separate ways. I don't know what he did. May he rest in peace as well. He did a great job on my record, though. Great guy. And we got Joe Franco, who played with Twisted Sister on its last album, on the drums. And then we were getting ready to go into the studio, and they found on Bernie's lungs, they found a dark spot in England. And he had to go in the hospital to have the spot checked. What do they call that? You know what I mean. And when he woke up at the hospital, this is right before he was supposed to come to the United States to join us in the studio for the first Widowmaker album, he wakes up in an oxygen tent. And they say, Mr. Torme, we have good news and bad news. The good news is it's just a dark spot. It's not cancer. It's nothing like that. You're fine. The bad news is we accidentally punctured your lung. And you're going to have to stay here in the hospital in this oxygen tent for a while. So Bernie was hospitalized, and we brought in Al Pitrelli in the 11th hour to play guitar. So Bernie was supposed to be in Widowmaker. So we didn't ever get to work together, ever get to play together. Desperado had been rehearsing songs for the album, for recording, and we did an unannounced show in Birmingham at a club. We were put on the bill as the Klinky Bits because we were very Western oriented, wearing a lot of spurs and things like that at that point. A lot of chains, a lot of jewelry, long rider coats. We were totally into it. So the Klinky Bits were going to go up there. And you got to remember, it's Dee Snider, Clive Burr from Iron Maiden, and Bernie Torme. And Bernie was best known in England for having played with Ian Gillan in the Ian Gillan band for a couple of years, having had hit records with him. And he also was the first guitar player to replace Randy Rhoads. And I'll get into that in just a second. So we just want to go. We've been rehearsing these songs. Let's just go up there and rock these songs, the Klinky Bits. So we're backstage and we're getting ready to go out. We want to have our image, the Klinky Bits. And we were cowboys coming in off the plains. So here we are with bags of raw flour. It's that brownish flour. It hasn't been bleached. And we are all dressed in our long rider coats and we got our cowboy boots and a whole thing, long hair, but we're just still, we're going to be, but there's some sort of rock band, Western romanticized bullshit. And we're throwing flour on ourselves to make it look like we're dusty from coming off the road. Just got off the horses, just rode across the desert. And Clive Burr is wearing a brand new suede fringe jacket. Clive was always very neat. And everything's clean and perfect. And Clive doesn't want to put any dust on him. We call it dust. And we're walking and we're puffing. There's so much flour on us. We're just taking steps. It's like you're coming, covered with dust. And Clive is spotless. And finally, Mark Russell, who was too young to be in awe of Clive Burr, goes, "Great Clive." So he was from London. "Great Clive. So we just rode into town on our horses, and you were staying clean in the stagecoach." So Clive, hearing that, he sprinkles a little bit of dust on him. He's not committed. And we played this. No one filmed it. I've never seen anything. Went out there, should surprise the audience in Birmingham. The Klinky bits played, but that was the only time we ever played. And I actually I jammed with Bernie's GMT project, that was something that he's had a number of records out with at Hard Rock Hell, and we did "Am I Evil," which you may know from some of you from the Widowmaker record. That was a Desperado song. It was the opening track on the Desperado album, and we did "Am I Evil" together. That was the only other time that Bernie and I got to rock together. And Bernie, supposedly, everything I heard, was an incredible performer, and I really sort of saddened that I never got to perform with him, because I've seen him in action. He rocked. Bernie rocked. But Bernie's biggest claim to fame, but it's not his biggest claim to fame, it should be his biggest claim to fame, is that he was the original replacement for Randy Rhoads. When Randy Rhoads died, Ozzy's phone, by Ozzy I mean Sharon, blew up. Guitar players blew. It's two syllables. Blew up. Guitar players, being the egomaniacs that they are, and by the way, I'm D. Snyder. I'm an egomaniac. Hi, D. Okay, but they just saw a job opportunity in the biggest metal band in the world. And they started calling Ozzy's room. I know someone who got Ozzy's room number at the hotel the day Randy died and woke Ozzy up to ask him for the gig. Needless to say, he didn't get the gig. Everybody wanted that gig. And Ozzy and the band were devastated. But Sharon, the band was breaking huge. Sharon was not letting this momentum die. Ozzy was not going to stop playing. And I think Ozzy would have. Rudy Sarzo is Randy's best friend. You should read Rudy's book. It's called Off the Rails. Brilliant book. And it's so compelling because he starts with the last moment he saw Randy. Randy going to his bunk on the bus and pulling it up and going, "Hey, Rudes." He called him Rudes. "We're going to go on a plane. You want to go?" Me and his pilot is going to take us for a ride. And Rudy said, "I'm really tired. I'm just going to stay here and sleep." That was the last time he saw him. We all know what happened shortly after. And the book at that point goes back to the early days of Rudy's career and his relationship with Randy and Quiet Riot, and then follows. And the whole time you're following this trail, you know the end. So they're moving and this is happening, and Randy dies. And it's just so compelling. Off the Rails. Rudy Sarzo. Rudy's got a podcast too. You should check that out as well. Rudy's one of my favorite people in the world. Love that guy. But anyway, so everybody was calling for the job. And Sharon and I think Sharon and Ozzy, I want to put words in her mouth, but I'll know if you want the job, it's not going to be yours. You shouldn't be calling days after someone dies in tragic death and be asking for the job. That's just fucked up. That's bullshit. And that had to be the way they felt. At the same time, they knew that they were going to continue on. So they started looking for guitar players. And one of the guitar players who didn't call for the job was Bernie Torme. Bernie Torme had made a name for himself playing with Ian Gillan, and now was viewed as a white Jimi Hendrix. A guy, I can't explain to you how good this guy was. And he had a solo deal. I think it was on Virgin. His first band was called Electric Gypsies. I guess the influence is there. Anyway, he gets the call, and Bernie, being an egotistical guitar player, he says, all right, I'll help you out and fill in, but I got a solo album, right? So he's going to fill in. So I know a lot more of this story. He gets on this, they are in a rush to get things going. He get on the plane, they said, we can't ship you gear. We'll get you gear. There'll be gear here there will be gear here for you when you arrive. Bernie flies over. He's listening to the live tapes. He's listening to the albums. He doesn't know the material. To make matters worse, it's called hammer-on style. Eddie Van Halen, George Lynch, Randy Rhoads, that where they use their fingers on the fretboard, and it's arguable about who invented the style, by the way. That's another argument for another day. I never heard it. I never heard the style until Eddie Van Halen came around, so he's the guy, but supposedly some say George Lynch, some say Randy Rhoads, and Randy Rhoads and George Lynch both taught at the same music school, Randy's mother's school, and George was Randy. When Randy was on the road, George would fill in and teach Randy's students. Okay, so but Bernie is a Hendrix influenced guitar player, and he's and he's a blues based guitar player, and very punky too, very raw. And this is technical stuff, the hammer-ons and stuff. So Bernie is studying. He has to learn Randy Rhoads' style of guitar playing in 2 weeks. Get to the U.S., learn the live set, learn Randy's style. And the first show was Philadelphia, was in the arena in Philadelphia, the Spectrum. Second show was Madison Square Garden with Ozzy Osbourne. 2 weeks after Randy Rhoads dies, one of the most tragic deaths in rock and roll history. A beloved guitar player, a beloved personality, a beloved guitar hero. And Bernie has to walk out there and take his place. Bernie gets to the States, and he walks into rehearsal. And all of Randy's equipment is there. All of it. Every amplifier says Randy Rhoads on it. Every pedal box, Randy Rhoads on it. And there are Randy's guitars. The polka dot guitars. The Flying V's. And Bernie says they want me to play a dead man's guitar. It's like the most personal thing in the world. The guitar. On my tweet about Bernie, I said, your guitar weeps. Because, somebody may own it eventually. Bernie's, I'll get to that in a minute. But the fact of the matter is, when you're one of those players like Brian May or Bernie or Randy, they're guitar players that have the guitar or the guitars. And there was the polka dot Flying V, the guitar. And Sharon wanted Bernie to play Randy's guitar. And Bernie went to Sharon and said, please, don't ask me to do this. He goes, I'm here. I'm ready to do the job. I'll play through his amps. I'll play through his pedals, his chords. But please don't ask me to play the man's guitar. So they gave Bernie some money, and he went out to the pawn shops and he found a vintage Stratocaster. And this vintage Stratocaster, it was blue. It was blue metallic. Really weird. Never seen it. But it was clearly a paint over. So, the guitar was great, but someone had ruined a perfectly good Strat by painting over it. So Bernie played that guitar everywhere, and he treated it like shit. He loved the guitar, but to him, it was punk. Tell us, throw the guitar there, throw the guitar here, throw whatever. One day in Desperado, Bernie comes walking in, and he's got a anvil case, custom guitar case, with like a handcuff on his wrist, with locks on the case. Like, what's that? He goes, it's my guitar. And I'm like, what is it doing in that case? He goes, I just found out it's one of the rarest fucking Stratocasters in the world. Turns out that this paint over was done by Fender to certain guitars. It's like it was kind of like the guitar version of the Beatles' Yesterday and Today album, where they put the cover, put another cover over the original cover, that kind of deal. This guitar is worth tens of thousands of dollars. It's super freaking valuable, and Bernie was treating it like shit for years. But he got that guitar, he goes in, and he plays, and he rehearses with Ozzy's band. He said he was always grateful to Don Airey, the keyboard player, because the material was so fresh still that Don Airey, the keyboard, was off stage, would yell out to Bernie, D, F, key, like moments in like key changes in the songs that he was fucking up on, who would yell to him the first few shows till he got it. But Bernie said it was still awkward as fuck. This is back in 1980, what are we talking about? 84? 83? 82, right around there, right? I'm keep backing it up. Because this is before 9/11. So all of his plane tickets said Randy Rhoads on it. All of his hotel reservations said Randy Rhoads on it. Everything said Randy Rhoads on it. So he said it was just very eerie. It was very short time after his passing. The fans were mourning. He said the fans were great to him. And anybody who saw Bernie play were blown away. In 2 weeks' time, Bernie mastered Randy Rhoads' style and delivered every night. So much so that Ozzy and Sharon offered Bernie the gig permanently. And Bernie, in quote, the biggest mistake of my life, said no. He said no. He said, I've got a solo record deal and I'm going to be the next Jimi Hendrix. He says, I'll stay here until you get somebody to replace me, but I've got to go back and record my solo album. Not a great career choice. Bernie admits it. Every guitar player who's ever worked with Bernie has gone on to have his own career separately. Work with Ozzy is almost like, being a member of Kiss. From Zach Wilde to, I'm forgetting everybody's name now. But all the other, Brad Gillis, all the guitar players who have been in there have gone off and had careers separate from Ozzy because they played with Ozzy. It propelled them. Rudy Sarzo didn't play guitar, played bass, but that really helped kick off the Quiet Riot thing. So Bernie says, no, I'll stay with you till you get somebody. So that's when they find Brad Gillis. They bring Brad in, and Brad starts shadowing Bernie Torme. And when I know Brad, and when I met Brad and we talked, he told me how one of the greatest guitar solos he ever saw in his life was played by Bernie Torme. He said, I would stand there and watch the set and study the set, and Bernie Torme would do a guitar solo. He said it was mind-numbing how amazing this guy was. There's so many guitar players who sing his praises, and unfortunately for Bernie, he never really got the recognition he should have had. I thought that I found my Jimmy Page, my Joe Perry. my Zach Wilde, my foil as a singer. Bernie played guitar the way I thought in my head. And when we started writing together, I was a very limited writer because I didn't play guitar. I wrote riffs in my head. So writing with Bernie was a guitar player, a real guitar player. And he would take my melodies and he would take them to the next level. So if you have a chance, I'm not trying to sell Desperado albums. You can download it for free. Just go. It's on YouTube. But please, in memory of Bernie, go listen. Give it a listen. Just know the guitar player he was. Check out his stuff with Gillan. Check out his stuff with GMT. Check out his stuff with Electric Gypsies. Check out even his most recent Shadowland, I think the record's called. His most last album. I'm sure the money is going to his family. He wasn't a wealthy man. And he's getting ripped off by the company that put it together. So anything you do to support Bernie Torme's legacy and family and I think it's kind of a cool thing to do. But more than anything, know the guitar player that we lost. Such a talent. And I lost a friend. And I was talking to Mark Russell. Let me check my times here. Yeah, this is good. I was talking to Mark Russell, and he said, I told Bernie, I said, you should call D up and talk to him. This was a couple of years ago. About doing a Desperado record. Doing a rock record together. Putting the band back together. Just for the, I don't know, that just that feeling like completion, I mean, the rug was pulled out from underneath us. The record came out years later, but we never had there was no resolution. And Bernie said, D's busy, he's always running around, and I am. He's always doing something. Yeah, I don't want to bother him. And I told Mark Russell, I said, I would have viewed that as a challenge, and I like a challenge. I would have said yes. But Bernie's gone and Clive's gone. And that opportunity has passed, moved on. So here's to you, Bernie Torme. I love you. I miss you. The world lost a great guitar player that most people don't even know about. All right, that's it for this week. I'll see you next time.